So before we begin in earnest, I want to talk about yesterday, because this is now the second day of our route walking the BQE, and I was walking along the section where the naval graveyard is, down in the Williamsburg area, and there is really a very small stretch there. I would say about 3 minutes worth of the entire 10-hour walk when the route, the BQE route, intersects with kind of the waterfront bike path there. So I went up in the naval yard, graveyard, because I've been there a bunch of times, just kind of spying it out. Only was there for 10 seconds or so. And then I walked down, and I'm walking along the path. And as I'm walking along the path, this biker just stops abruptly next to me.
Who could that have been?
And as at first I thought it was just somebody that dropped something. Like, it didn't really occur to me much what was going on. And the person was like, hey, and I was like, hey. And I'm just walking for like 10 or 15 seconds, and then the biker starts walking next to me. And he's like, hey, Varley. And I was like, oh shit, it's Bahij. And it was so amazing, because it was like you pulled up to me and you're like, I'm going to the kitchen, you want anything? Like, it was when meanwhile, like, there was like, it was like a Star Wars level of like precision that you were only on there for like 30 seconds. I'm only on there for 3 minutes of 10 hours, and it just so happened to be right at that time.
You know, I noticed you walking from behind, and then I looked back and I saw you, and the only reason I recognized you is because of your Highly Varley logo on your hat, and I think you had one on your jacket too. Yeah, totally unexpected. I'm notorious for being very non-surprised when I see people in the street. People are like, hey, Bahij. I'm like, hey, what's up, Phoebe?
Yeah, totally, man. I mean, I have a reputation as a bit of a cool reactor, but you were like cold fusion, man. You were just like, it was like you had just seen me yesterday or something. It was really funny. But yeah, I mean, the odds of that happening were funny, but it was cool. It was good to see you, and like we got to talk a little bit about how this day was even gonna, be set up.
Unexpected. You know, I was wondering. I went out on a ride yesterday just to have fun on a Sunday, and I went out mostly east. Then I came back. I was kind of wondering if I would at any point intersect with you on your walk. Didn't think you would be there. Honestly. But I had a nice long ride, and this was just toward the end that I saw you.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Were you riding on the Greenway the whole way?
No, I rode first east out to Highland Park, and then kind of over the hump into Queens, meandered around a bit, then came up Queens Boulevard and south once I got to Sunnyside.
Oh, nice. Yeah. That's a really big ride.
Yeah, it's about the average ride that I would like to do on a kind of a Sunday weekend day.
Yeah. Well, there's so much both Jesse and I have wanted to talk to you about. We've been excited to have you on. And this particular route makes sense for a bunch of reasons. We are in the shadow of the BQE right now. You may be able to hear the din. We certainly can.
We can see it from here.
Yeah, you'll be able to hear it on the video, I'm sure.
Yeah, we are in Gowanus right now, and so there's also just industrial truck traffic coming by. But I mean, in addition to all of that, which we'll get to, you just mentioned the biking, and we know you're well involved in bike advocacy. I mean, I guess tell us a little bit about how you came into that advocacy role,
Yeah, sure. I do a lot of bike advocacy around New York, mostly with an organization called Transportation Alternatives. They're a big advocate for alternative transportation styles of many types, primarily biking, although lately they've been kind of making a stronger foray into advocacy for walking as well. I got into that really after I came back to New York City from college. So I grew up in New York City, and when I was going to high school, every day I would take the city bus, MTA bus, from my house down in Tribeca up to my high school in Chelsea. And my mom worked kind of near me, and so we would take the bus together every day. We could see it turn the corner, so we would wait in our living room and watch for the bus turning the corner from the West Side Highway, and as soon as it did, we would run down to the bus stop. The bus driver knew we did that, so he would wait if we hadn't yet made it down. And so we would take the bus up to Chelsea every day together. I got a little sick of riding the bus with my mom every day, as most high schoolers do, especially because there were other kids from my high school on the bus.
Right.
And so to avoid doing that, I started biking to high school, and I would bike up Hudson Street onto 8th Avenue. I started doing that maybe late sophomore year, going into junior, senior years. And in my senior year, the city, under Transportation Commissioner Jeanette Sadik-Khan, started to install the first protected bike lanes in New York City. I think they were the first protected bike lanes in the United States. And one of the first ones was installed on 9th Avenue, which was my route home, and then another early one was installed on 8th Avenue, which was on my route to school. So during high school, very early on, I kind of saw what a big difference it made to have really strong bike infrastructure when you're riding. Of course, I didn't know anything about transportation alternatives or the fact that there were advocates and people calling for that to happen at the time. I was pretty oblivious to that. I just thought as a high schooler, great, the city is making improvements.
Right.
So I went to college, I studied architecture, so I was kind of very aware of things in the built environment, and I came back to New York City. And I started looking around for ways to get involved. I started first by going to community board meetings. We talked a little bit about community board meetings earlier on our walk. And then I figured out this organization, Transportation Alternatives, has a pretty active volunteer wing to the organization, which tries to get better bike infrastructure and everything in New York City. So from there, I started to go to their monthly meetings. I got involved in some of their campaigns. Eventually, I had been going a few years, and I started to lead a few campaigns. For a couple of years, I was the co-chair of the Brooklyn Activist Committee, which kind of coordinated a whole bunch of different walking and biking safety campaigns around the borough of Brooklyn. So I've done a lot of different things with TA. Now I'm on the organization's board, so I kind of now have a more boring fiduciary duty, but still do get out and do some of the advocacy.
How were your parents like with biking? I mean, biking in the city is something that, you have to be very responsible and aware, especially because we haven't gone as far as we might like with the advocacy work.
Yeah.
Right.
Were your parents, like trusting of you? Were they anxious? Like where were they on that?
Definitely anxious. Definitely, it's a scary thing at first to have your kid bike alone. I didn't start by biking to high school though. From middle school, me and my friends would bike around a lot just to get around because that was the way we could get around. That was one of the nice things about growing up in the city is that you can get around like that. You can get around on the subway. You have a lot of autonomy as a teenager. And so we used to bike quite frequently between Lower Manhattan and kind of Brooklyn Heights, Carroll Gardens area where some of my friends lived. And so they knew I was already kind of confident biking on the streets, so it wasn't totally terrifying when I started biking to high school. They were definitely made more confident when those protected lanes went in. It wasn't actually until probably senior year of high school that I started wearing a bike helmet.
Oh, really?
My godmother was totally terrified of me biking in the streets, and she got it for me as my birthday present one year, and so I obligatorily started wearing the bike helmet.
Yeah. And now?
Do you wear a helmet now?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Now I wear a helmet every time I go out. Almost every time. Sometimes if I'm running a little errand, I might not.
Yeah.
But definitely for a long ride like I did yesterday, definitely wear a helmet.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not that comfortable for me, and they really don't make helmets that fit well on curly hair. So, that's a call to anybody who might be thinking about making those. That would be great.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great business opportunity.
Yeah.
When you joined the organization, were you one of the younger people in the room?
So I joined at the level of the activist committee, and I really wasn't. I was pretty kind of standard demographic for that activist committee level in terms of age. It's a lot of younger people who tended to go to those meetings. There were some veterans, there were some middle-aged folks, some older seniors who'd been involved in the organization for a long time. TA's been around since the 70s. And so there was some seniority in the room, but a lot of the folks who get involved at the activist level and are out doing and running the campaigns are pretty young people. So when I joined there, I was not abnormally young. I am abnormally young for the board. I think I'm the youngest person on the board. But TA has recently shown a lot of initiative trying to diversify their board in terms of age, race, demographics, and so they reached out an extension to invite me into the board, and I was really happy to be able to join and kind of bring in a slightly different perspective than a lot of the folks who have been on the board for, in some cases, a really long time.
Yeah. What are some of the major things that have happened while you've been there? Or is that a really hard question because it's broad, or is there
it's
something
a broad
you can
question,
point to
but,
that was really exciting?
A lot of big things have happened while I've been working with TA. One of the ones I'm proud of and affects me more personally is the 4th Avenue bike lane that starts up at Atlantic Avenue and now goes all the way down to Bay Ridge. That was a huge thing that came about as a result of our advocacy. The protected bike lane on J Street was another campaign that we had really pushed for and came about as a result of our advocacy. Several of the north-south bike lanes and all of the crosstown protected bike lanes that went in the last few years are products of TA advocacy. We can't wholly claim those things.
Right.
Of course, the city is involved in that, and the city's transportation engineers and DOT are also very active in trying to make the streets safer for New York City. But TA has had at least a hand in pushing all of those. The 14th Street busway that goes across the island, and now they're kind of exploring some other places to do busways like that. Queens Boulevard protected bike lane. There's been a lot. The city's been active in trying to expand the mileage of bike lanes in the city.
It's amazing. I mean, thank you for all of that.
Not me, but
well, and the whole organization. But when I first lived in Brooklyn, I had a bike and I would try to bike around, but it was such a terrifying experience for me, especially on some of the bigger streets. And now, since COVID, I've started riding a bike again. There's also a city bike station near our house, which is new as of the end of 2019, so it's perfect timing.
Very cool.
And so on days when we're not walking, I sometimes ride the bike, and I've noticed the paths that I used to take that really turned me off of biking in the city are now fine. Good. And feel really safe.
That's very good to hear.
Yeah, and it's only been maybe, I don't know, I mean within a decade, within 10 years that I've noticed that major difference.
In my lifetime, which is not that long yet, I've seen a big change in the way that New York City's streets are treated, although there's still a lot of horrible crashes that happen in New York and a lot of death. The organization branched out and created a wing called Families for Safe Streets, which kind of brings together folks who have experienced crashes themselves or have had family members and friends killed from crashes. And that was really a foray into a whole new set of folks who've been negatively impacted by the way the streets are designed in New York City. And through that wing of the organization, some really big kind of citywide and systemic changes have happened, like the speed limit was lowered to 25 miles an hour on every street in the city, with few exceptions, and also the speed camera program that exists around New York City schools as a result of that work as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I feel like that, since you mentioned the poor quality of some of our streets, I feel like that's actually a really great segue into talking about the BQE itself. If I may just dive right into it. You can fill in the gaps here, I'm sure, but I've really just started researching the BQE specifically for this week. And of course, having my own experience, like driving on it and walking under it and living near it as well. But I learned that Robert Moses was the person that built the BQE and is also the person that has built a lot of our infrastructure that is crumbling. And it was this long, drawn out sort of section by section project that just plowed right through all the neighborhoods except for Brooklyn Heights, because they had an advocacy program themselves. And I guess I don't even know where to go from here, but since we talked about, maybe we can work our way backwards. It looks like one thing I read was that within the next 6 years, that section over near Brooklyn Heights is going to fall apart.
Well, it's in 2026, if I understand correctly, they're going to have to start diverting truck traffic, and then by 2036, it will start crumbling.
To fall apart.
Yeah, to dust.
Okay.
So they need to figure out a plan.
Yeah, that is of imminent importance right now. The Triple Cantilever is what that section of the BQE is called, under the promenade at Brooklyn Heights, which, just from a traffic engineering perspective, is a really, I think, ingenious way of routing traffic, basically in a way that it is less disruptive of neighborhood residents. That said, it is only a result, as you mentioned, of the fact that there was a active neighborhood association. There were wealthy, well-connected residents in the area who were able to kind of get right in the city's face and make sure that a massive highway did not cut straight through their neighborhood. The majority of the other neighborhoods along the route were not so well endowed, so to speak, and did not have that to their advantage. So the BQE really does cut straight through a lot of neighborhoods in New York City and creates a really harsh dividing line in a lot of places, along with other city highways and viaducts. It's funny when you mentioned the fact that Robert Moses had planned out the BQE and a lot of our crumbling infrastructure in New York City. It's true. A lot of it is now crumbling. At the time, it was kind of brand new, shiny, beautiful things. It was part of the age of the car culture that everybody was kind of really enamored by at the time. At the World Fair that happened in New York City in the 1930s. I can't remember exact year.
It was 40 and 41.
Okay,
because I think I just read it this morning.
Thank you very much. There was an exhibit called City of the Future that I think General Motors put on.
Okay.
And it was this big kind of diorama that showed like how New York City might look if it had like beautifully routed highways all throughout the city. And this was kind of part of that whole vision of a new type of city, and it was a city that was very divergent from the way everybody kind of experienced in new cities from the last, honestly, several thousand years, where it's a compact thing, you can walk around. This is a new time, and we've got this like new technology that can easily shuttle small groups of people from place to place, and so as a result, you had a whole generation of planners who grew up and were totally excited by this idea that we can get people around so-called efficiently through the use of these highways that cut through cities.
Right. I also read, just since you brought up the World's Fair, I read that there were 3 reasons for the BQE. There was connecting the neighborhoods, connecting the industry neighborhoods especially, so that people could get work done and that people from the different neighborhoods that were sort of underserved could get to places quicker.
Yeah.
Also getting to the bridges. The Triborough was a big one. And then also to get to the World's Fair faster.
Yeah.
That was a main reason.
Get to the airports too was a big part, yeah.
Sure, that makes sense, yeah. But I just thought that that they even considered this thing that only happened 2 years.
Right.
I guess happened again later, but in that sort of time period, it's funny to me that was a main, it's almost like building a highway so that one time that we have the Olympics in New York, people can make it there.
Yeah. No, it's a good comparison, but it was an event that brought tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of tourists to New York City from all around the world, also from all around the country. And so it was very much in the mindset of people planning at the time. And remember how big of a spectacle those fairs were. It was
back then,
huge grounds, pavilions from countries all over the world. They were a big deal. I kind of, as somebody who grew up outside the era of the World Fair, there's all sorts of problematic things with events like World's Fairs and the Olympics, like you mentioned, but I kind of wish I had seen the glamour of some of those.
Yeah,
Sure.
I definitely have a romanticized ideal about it if I kind of stay on the surface level.
Yeah.
Yeah.